You don't collapse all at once. You wear down quietly. It happens in small moments that don't look dramatic from the outside. A phone vibrating late at night when you were already tired. A pause before answering, followed by the familiar, "of course." A kitchen light still on while the rest of the house sleeps. You standing there, listening, holding someone else together with words you no longer fully feel. You tell yourself this is just what love looks like. Being needed, being reliable, being the one who shows up. But underneath that story, there is a different feeling, a dull pressure in the chest, a tiredness that sleep doesn't quite touch. Not the exhaustion of work or age or long days, something subtler. The weariness of always being the place where others set their weight down. You notice it most in the quiet afterward. When the call ends, when the door closes, when the thank you never quite comes. The room feels larger then, emptier. Like a light has been left on too long and is finally dimming. You sit with your hands open, still shaped as if they're holding something, even though there's nothing there anymore. Kind people often live this way without naming it. You learned early how to listen, how to sense what others needed before they asked. You learned to soften your own edges so no one else would feel uncomfortable. And it worked. People came to you. They leaned. They trusted. But leaning turns into resting, and resting turns into staying. So you keep giving, even when something in you has begun to thin. You give explanations, reassurance, time, patience. You give your calm to people who feel frantic, your certainty to people who feel lost. You give until the giving becomes automatic, almost invisible, even to yourself. And no one tells you when the balance quietly tips. There's a moment, usually alone, when you realize you are tired in a way that feels personal. Not angry, not bitter, just spent, as if a door inside you has been opening outward for years and no one noticed it was never being closed again. You don't resent the people you help. That's what makes this so confusing. You still care. You still understand. You still see their pain clearly. But you also notice how rarely anyone asks how you are and waits for the real answer. This is the fatigue of kindness. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a slow fading, like daylight slipping out of a room while you're still standing in it. And somewhere in that dimness, a quiet truth begins to surface, without accusation, without blame. You have been carrying too much. If we stay with this feeling a little longer, something begins to show itself. Not as a theory, not as a diagnosis, but as a pattern you recognize in your own hands. You didn't start giving this way out of weakness. You started because it worked. Somewhere along the line, you learned that being useful kept you close. That being the one who remembered, who fixed, who stayed calm, who said yes, created a kind of belonging. People relaxed around you. They needed you, and need can feel dangerously close to love. So we made a quiet agreement with the world, without ever signing it. I will carry more, and you won't leave. No one said this out loud. You may not have known you were saying it either. But the body remembers these contracts even when the mind forgets. The chest tightens when you consider not answering. The stomach dips when you imagine disappointing someone. There's a familiar guilt that arrives before you've even done anything wrong. You notice how quickly you move toward fixing. A problem appears, and your mind is already arranging solutions. Someone sighs, and you lean in. Someone struggles, and you offer strength before they ask. It feels natural, almost reflexive, as if stopping would require more effort than continuing. And yet there are moments that disturb the surface. You leave a message and it isn't returned. You say, "I'm fine," because it's easier than explaining the truth. You solve a problem no one asked you to solve and later feel strangely invisible. We tell ourselves we're just being good, responsible, loving. But underneath that story is a quieter fear. If I stop giving, what's left of me? We rarely admit this fear because it sounds unkind, even selfish. But it isn't. It's human. It's the old worry of becoming unnecessary, of fading from the picture if we don't keep proving our worth. So goodness slowly becomes performance, not a loud one, a careful one. You erase your needs just enough to stay needed. You minimize your tiredness. You explain away your hurt. You become very skilled at disappearing in small ways. This is the illusion we share, that goodness requires self-erasure, that love must be earned through depletion, that being kind means being less, and the guilt keeps it all in place. Guilt for wanting rest, guilt for wanting space, guilt for imagining a life where you are not constantly available. We confuse guilt with conscience, even when it's really just fear wearing a moral mask. But if you listen closely, something gentler is happening now. Not rebellion, not anger, just recognition. A soft, honest noticing of the cost. You begin to see that the giving was never the problem. It was the bargain beneath it. And once you see the bargain, you can no longer pretend it was love alone that kept you there. There comes a moment when the pattern finally reveals itself, not as a criticism, as a fact. It arrives quietly, like light entering a room you've lived in for years. Nothing dramatic happens, no argument, no collapse, just a sudden, unmistakable clarity. You see that the very thing you believed made you good has been slowly undoing you. You notice how your days are arranged around other people's needs, how your time bends outward, how your own desires wait patiently in the hallway, coats still on, never invited fully inside. You see how often your hands are extended and how rarely they are empty. This is the shock, gentle but firm. You realize that helping everyone has not been neutral. It has had a cost, not because people are cruel, not because kindness is wrong, but because any virtue, when asked to live without edges, turns against the one who carries it. A candle can give light. That is its nature. But when asked to burn for every room, every hour, without pause, it does not become more generous. It simply disappears. You feel sadness when this lands, a real sadness, because you remember how sincere your giving was, how you meant well, how you believed that love meant keeping the door open, no matter how cold the draft became. You remember the pride too, quiet, unspoken, in being the strong one, the steady one, the one who didn't need much. And at the same time, something loosens. Relief enters with the sadness, because now the exhaustion makes sense. The resentment you never wanted to admit makes sense. The strange loneliness that followed all that connection finally has a shape. You were not failing at kindness. You were erasing yourself with it. You see how often you stepped out of your own life to manage someone else's. How often you closed an inner door so another person wouldn't feel shut out. How the air in your own rooms grew thin, even as you kept opening windows for everyone else. This is not an accusation. It is an accounting. And in this clear light, something essential becomes obvious. Kindness was never meant to require your disappearance. Love was never meant to be proven through depletion. Care that costs you your center is not care. It is sacrifice mistaken for virtue. Nothing needs to be rejected here. Not your compassion, not your sensitivity, not your capacity to see and respond. Those are real gifts. But gifts too need a place to rest. Without that place, the giving does not purify. It drains. Without that place, generosity becomes self-neglect with a pleasant name. Without that place, goodness quietly turns into harm, aimed inward. You feel both grief and permission in this recognition. Grief for how long it took. Permission because you no longer have to pretend this way of living was sustainable. The room is brighter now, not harshly, just enough to see the truth without flinching. And it can be said simply, without drama. What costs you yourself is never pure kindness. After the clarity comes something quieter, not an argument, not a declaration, a pause. You begin to sense a different kind of strength moving in you, one that doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't need to. It knows where it stands. You feel it when the phone buzzes, and you let it rest, face down, just for a moment longer. You feel it when a request arrives wrapped in urgency, and you notice your breath before your answer. This is not withdrawal born of bitterness. It is a return. Boundaries, when they come from this place, do not look like walls. They feel more like thresholds. A doorway you step up to and decide quietly whether to cross. Some doors you leave open, others you close without slamming. Not to punish anyone, simply to keep the inside intact. There is dignity in this kind of refusal. You don't explain yourself because there is nothing to defend. You don't argue because nothing is being contested. You just don't move in the old way anymore. You stop rushing toward every knock. You let some calls go unanswered. You allow silence to do the work that explanations never could. And something unexpected happens. The world adjusts. Not immediately. Not without confusion. Some people keep knocking out of habit. Some wait, surprised by the quiet. A few drift away, gently, as if they were only ever leaning on motion. You watch this without cruelty, without triumph. You understand now that absence too communicates, sometimes more honestly than words. There is a deep respect in choosing peace without making a speech about it, in not needing to be understood in order to be whole. You discover that you can love people without being constantly available to them, that you can care without carrying, that stepping back does not always mean turning away. Sometimes it simply means letting others meet themselves. This kind of silence is not cold, it is clear. You feel your energy stop leaking at the edges. You notice how the air in your inner rooms changes when fewer demands pass through. The mind settles, the body softens, even time seems to widen, as if it had been waiting for you to stop explaining yourself to everyone else. There is no drama in this shift, no announcement, just small, steady choices that add up to a different posture in the world. You sit more often than you rush. You listen to yourself without immediately translating it for others. You begin to trust that what doesn't require your presence will survive without it, and what truly matters will find you without chasing. This is the quiet authority of self-respect, the kind that does not need witnesses. In the evening the phone is still. The curtains move slightly with the wind, and the house at last grows quiet. There is a moment when silence stops feeling like absence and begins to feel like care. Not the care that rushes forward, not the kind that fixes or soothes or explains, but a quieter kind, the care that knows when to step back. Think of a house at night. Inside, a single light is on. Not every room, just enough to see where you are. The door is closed, not locked. Anyone who belongs knows how to knock. Anyone who does not can pass by without harm. The house is not hiding. It is resting. This is what distance can become. For a long time, you believed love meant leaving all the doors open, letting the noise come in, letting the wind move through unchecked. You thought warmth required constant access, but a house with every door open eventually loses its heat. The fire burns faster, the walls grow cold. So you learned something simple and old. You learned to tend the inside. Silence from this place is not punishment, it is preservation. You are not withdrawing affection, you are keeping it from being scattered. You are choosing where the light goes. You are deciding which rooms are lived in and which remain quiet. There is a strange relief in this, a gratitude that arrives without ceremony. You notice how the space around you feels kinder when fewer demands cross the threshold, how your voice returns when it is not constantly spent, how listening becomes deeper when it is no longer automatic. This silence is not empty, it is full of attention. You sit in your home, literal or inner, and feel the steadiness of it, the floor beneath your feet, the air that does not ask anything from you, the soft boundaries that allow warmth to stay where it belongs. You realize that harmony was never about closeness alone. It was about rhythm, about coming and going, about knowing when to open and when to rest. People you love still exist beyond the door. You have not erased them. You have not rejected them. You have simply stopped living in the doorway. And in doing so, something subtle happens. Your care becomes cleaner. When you do show up, it is whole. When you do speak, it carries weight. When you do give, it no longer empties you. Distance has refined your kindness, not diminished it. This is a secular holiness, no doctrine, no vow, just the quiet dignity of tending your own light so it does not go out. You understand now that love does not require constant presence. It requires integrity. It requires a place to return to. It requires a threshold that keeps the inside alive. The house stands, the light remains, and nothing essential is lost. Distance can be love when it keeps the light burning. And then, almost without noticing, you stop bracing. There is no final insight that arrives with trumpets, no speech you give yourself, no moment where everything is neatly resolved. What comes instead is lighter than that, quieter. You simply stop holding so tightly to the story that you owe everyone something. You feel it in the body first. The shoulders drop when you realize you don't have to explain why you're tired. The jaw loosens when you understand that silence is not a mistake. The breath lengthens when you see that peace does not need a reason to exist. For so long, you believed that clarity had to be defended, that your choices needed translation, that if you could just explain yourself well enough, carefully enough, no one would be hurt, and you would finally be free. But explanation is a subtle kind of captivity. It keeps you turned outward, watching reactions, managing meanings, adjusting yourself to fit what others can accept. And one day, you notice that the explanations are heavier than the choices themselves. That peace becomes fragile when it needs approval to survive. So you let that go. You stop rehearsing what you would say if someone asked why you've changed. You stop preparing defenses for boundaries you no longer debate. You allow misunderstandings to remain unfinished. Not out of indifference, out of trust. Trust that what is real does not require constant narration. This is the release. You look back at the long arc, the fatigue, the endless giving, the quiet resentment you never wanted to admit. You look at the clarity that followed, the moment you saw the cost without flinching. And now you stand here, in a different place altogether. Not hardened, not withdrawn, just unburdened. There is space where guilt used to live. Space where urgency once crowded every thought. You feel almost empty, but it is a clean emptiness, like a room after it has been cleared and swept. Nothing missing, nothing demanding attention. You understand now that peace does not argue its case. It does not convince. It does not chase. It simply is. And when it arrives, you recognize it by how little it asks of you. You still care, perhaps more honestly than before. But the care no longer costs you your center. You can sit with yourself without scanning the horizon for the next need. You can enjoy the quiet without filling it. You can let life come to you instead of meeting it halfway every time. This is not withdrawal from the world. It is a return to proportion. You belong to yourself again, not in a grand way, in a simple way, the way a person belongs to their own breath, their own pace, their own evening light. There is nothing left to prove, nothing left to justify, only the calm recognition that you are allowed to be here without explanation, and that is enough. You are not distant. You are finally at rest.